stop their drive for votes and turn their energies to the national emergency, selling war bonds, recruiting for the what. Many join the leader work on the farm so England's farmers can go to war. Others join the services, learn to spit and polish with the best. Says former Prime Minister Balfour, behind every man in the trenches are 10 persons making it possible for him to stay there. 7 of the 10 are women. The needs of the war machine pushed them into jobs they might never have chosen. They replaced men as maintenance workers, munitions workers, train conductors, at lower wages than the men, but their country needs them. In the process, they immeasurably help the suffrage cause. They are obviously neither too foolish to vote, as the average man believes, nor too noble, as Prime Minister Gladstone once claimed. War is still a cloud. The suffragettes put on their biggest referendum campaign in New York in 1915. There are daily demonstrations, street corner meetings, torchlight parades, flying squadrons of speakers from the Battery to Buffalo. But they will lose by a huge majority. In 1916, women from every state descend on the presidential nominating convention seeking suffrage plaques. The militants aim their shafts at Wilson as head of the party in power who can, but doesn't, urge suffrage. Suffrage already has won in a few states. Wyoming first in 1869. Idaho in 1896. California after a seesaw election in 1911. Illinois, the first state east of the Mississippi, in 1913. Now new victories, Rhode Island, and in 1917, New York. 7 million women in 17 states can now vote for president. 20 million women in 31 states still cannot. It will take a federal amendment before all women can vote. In 1917, as they did in the Civil War, American women go to war. But this time, there is more for them to do. They go into heavy industry, munitions, oil refining, chemical production, transportation, in addition to the usual nursing, knitting, and victory garden. They hope that this time they will be given the vote in recognition of services rendered, as they were not after the Civil War. Alice Paul's group, many of whom are Quakers, ignore the war. They continue to picket the White House. Their banners note the discrepancy between Wilson's words and deeds. Jailed, mistreated, and released after a public outcry. In prison garb, they tour the country to rally sympathy for the cause. Other women go to the battlefronts abroad. They work for the Red Cross and the YMCA in France and in Italy. At the war's end, the servicewomen are reviewed by Secretary of the Navy Josephus Daniels and his assistant, young Franklin D. Roosevelt. They are decorated by General Pershing. President Wilson lauds them and suggests that Congress now pass the suffrage amendment. His suggestion falls on deaf ears. In most of the English-speaking world, in Germany, Scandinavia, Russia, and Central Europe, women now vote, but not in America. The struggle must go on. Anita Powell.
One of the demonstrations that I was in at a time when they did not arrest people because the women were fighting with watchfires, burning words that we said were uttered by the president that were meaningless until American women were enfranchised. The women were standing on picket lines with glorious banners, and the Senate decided to adjourn. And there were only a few votes lacking, and we thought they should call up the suffrage amendment. And so we had a great, great banner that was the size of many streets, really. Across the street we marched about with 15 of us carrying this banner. We protest against the adjournment of the United States Senate without passing the women's suffrage amendment. And the policemen rushed upon us from all sides. They knocked some of the women down on the Capitol stairs. I'll never forget the way they treated Alice Paul because they knew she was the leader of the fight, hitting her under the chin. All of us had our hair pulled, and of course in those days we had long hair. And Miss Paul, who was tremendously wise politically, she said immediately when we were let out of the basement of the Capitol, we must go up and see the senators. I remember I went up to Senator Morris Shepherd of Texas, one of the finest of the suffrage senators. And he was indignant because we were so disheveled and I looked so badly, and he said, I will go in and tell the man this must end. Suffrage must be passed.
Little by little, sentiment is changed. Avid supporter William Jennings Bryan raises a suffrage banner over the Capitol. Reluctant senators hastily climb aboard the bandwagon to win the favor of these future voters. A few diehards, like Senators William Borah and Henry Cabot Lodge, remain opposed to the end. In June 1919, the Susan B. Anthony Amendment finally passes Congress. It will pave the way to the polls for 20 million more women. First, the amendment must be ratified by 3/4, 36 of the states. The women instantly start campaigning. By mid-1920, 35 states have acted. One more is needed as Tennessee prepares to vote. Liquor interest, traditional opponents of women's suffrage, Deep South politicians, not even reconciled to Negro men voting, all descend on Nashville. Harry Byrne, 24, in the dark suit, cast the deciding vote.
When the legislature was called into session by Governor Roberts, most of us expected it to be a routine affair because in Tennessee the governor is quite persuasive and has lots of influence with members of the legislature. After we reached Nashville, we learned that what we thought was practically a state issue, a national issue, because as went Tennessee, so went the nation.
It was the state that cast the deciding vote for women's suffrage. I was in that campaign, and so were 5 or 6 others from Washington, and many women came down to Tennessee to try to win that vote. It was the last state that could possibly give us the vote through ratification, which had to be by 36 states.
It so happens that after I had gotten to Nashville, people from all over the country had gone into my county. They had indignation meetings. They caused the courts to adjourn so that they might pass resolutions. And my constituency was in a great state of turmoil. I don't know yet exactly what the majority favored, but anyway, there's lots of feelings existed. So much so that when I would go home on a weekend, I would generally keep a bodyguard around so that no one would attack me. So far as I recall, I always favored votes for women. It was a logical attitude from my standpoint. My mother was a college woman. She was a student of national and international affairs. She took an interest in all public issues. She could not vote, and yet the tenant farmers on our farm, some of whom were illiterate, could vote. And I had decided long ago that women should vote and had an inherent right to do so. On that roll call, when I was confronted to the fact that I was going to go on record for time and eternity on the merits of the question, I voted in favor of ratification.
On August 26, 1920, the Susan B. Anthony Amendment becomes the law of the land. An 80-year-old struggle is won. Declares one of the leaders of the fight, Young suffragettes who helped forge the last links in the chain were not born when it began. Old suffragettes who forged the first links were dead when it ended. So says Carrie Chapman Catt. At the first election, only 1/4 of the eligible women voted. Today, the percentage is up to 60. What has it meant? Neither the utopia the women prophesied, nor the chaotic ruin the men feared. But, according to Bertrand Russell, an early advocate of woman suffrage, a most astonishing force for good emerged when the women got the vote.